Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday's Lunch and Learn. My name is Will Pedersen. I run our customer success org here. Uh, As always, I don't, Maru, do we have any pre-submitted questions for today?
No, not today.
Okay. As always, you guys can use the raise hand feature, ask in the Q&A section or ask in the chat section. And we'll go ahead and get your, or because it kind of looks like we have a bit of a light crowd today, just go ahead and come off mute and ask a question if you'd like. I'll be happy to answer it for you.
Hi, Will. This is Chris Young.
Hey, Chris, how are you today?
Hey, good. Thank you. So not a specific question, but kind of a general one.
Okay.
At my work, we're interested in starting a project where the goal will be we'll have a number of XML files that will be added to a directory, perhaps on a daily basis. And these XML files will have data that we want to import into a MySQL database.
Okay.
And so we were interested in seeing if we could use decisions to, like, I've already done a little bit of exploration with importing XML, so I know I can do that and I can schedule jobs to do it. But what I was curious about is what features are there perhaps in decisions that would allow management of a number of files in a directory? Can I archive files? Can I, how much file management can I do right within decisions? Can I check timestamps on files? That type of thing. And if not, no big deal, just doing some exploration. But yeah, just any other thoughts that might come to mind about, how you would approach that project, and maybe there are some things and decisions that I could learn from your expertise.
Yeah, okay. So is the question, so you're going to be saving files into like a network share? That's not going to change, right? These XML files being saved to the file system somewhere.
Right.
And you know today how to pick them up with a scheduled job and how to get their data and then map their data into an external database? Or do we need to talk about that part?
I think I'm good on that because, I've played around with the serialize and deserialize, steps and decision.
Okay.
And I've done that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've done that successfully. And I've also used, like batch storage steps to put that into a internal data structure.
Yep.
And then I have database integration with our MySQL. So the one thing I haven't done is actually do storage into MySQL, but I've looked at the steps that you can do for that. So I don't think that will be hard to do.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just, there's some concern from the project management that, they're anticipating something like maybe 15 to 20 of these files, and each one would be associated with perhaps a different table in a MySQL database. And so they said, is this something, that decisions would be well suited to do? Is there anything we need to know about it before we agree to do this project?
Okay. Okay, so you need to fetch the files. You need to deserialize the files. You need to confirm what table or even what database itself you need to save the file into. And then you mentioned checking file like timestamps. What I was hearing there was, do you need to create like a web UI to look at that directory, or is that is that not correct?
I think the question was, does decisions have a way that they can tell that the file has been changed since it was last looked at? And is there any way, like after, the data within the XML file has been successfully imported, that now you can set a flag, perhaps on the file, or maybe it has to be in the database, I don't know, but where it says like, that job's done, we don't need to, that file has been covered, we can now, safely archive that somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, let's start playing around with this idea a little bit here. This is a great question. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Is this your first one of these that you've joined with us by chance?
Second one, actually.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's a great resource. I'm surprised
Yeah,
there aren't
I
scads of
can't figure
people
out
in
why.
here.
Me too. Hey, any help you can give me trying to figure out how to convince more people to come, I'm happy to take that.
Sure.
So file manipulation workshop. So I have a customer who's doing something. They pull a file down from an SFTP server,
Mhm.
and those files are date time stamped in the file name.
Okay.
And what they do is actually they just created a simple database structure. That structure has a single row in it.
Mhm.
And every time what they do is they run this job, say every 15 minutes. And they look at the SFTP server, they pull the list of files down, and then they say, all right, they then do a little bit of string manipulation to kind of turn that date time stamp into an actual date time. They sort it and they say, is the record I have in the database older than the most current record?
Right.
And if the answer is yes, then it does nothing, right? And if the answer is no, it is a newer one, it actually takes that and it does an update on this one special purpose database table whose only job is to record the file name of the last process file. And then it proceeds forward. So it's always saving off the last sort of, here file name dash, timestamp as a single row. It sort of it keeps one active row in a table, and that's how it knows when to ignore, when to act on, and when to ignore.
Okay.
Let's see if we look at list files in directory. Does this give us timestamps? It's going to give us a list of strings. Let's see here. So if we let me put a directory in here. Let's see what I get back. Just a moment. I'm going to put this static string here. I will say this does sound like a great use case for us. So here we go. I've got some files. I don't get access to the file, to the timestamp of the file using list files in directory. What else? Is there something that'll give me list files in directory by extension? List files in directory. Now this is going to be under flow step category is file management. Let's go here, see. Integration. No data. Okay, where is, oh, here we go. File management. Get last write time. Interesting. That takes in probably a file path. Let's just see what other things we have here. Find files, count lines in file, close, touch file. We can definitely update the timestamp using touch. We can move them. So we could have a directory. Once we process, we could move the file from, the working directory into an archive directory.
Yeah, that'd be good.
You can create directories. So if you needed to generate, directories based on properties and then move files into them, you can do that. List files and directory by extension, list files and directory, list subdirectories. Let's see, get last write time. I'm gonna just do some, let me try this. I'm gonna loop this list files and directory step. And for each of those files, I'm gonna pass it into get last write time. And let me see what I get back out of here. So for each, we'll take in list directories in list files and directory one output. And this will take in, I think, item, which is the path. Let's see if this fails on me or not. Okay, so get last write time. Let's look at input output data. Okay, so this is what file? Execute in unit test.bat. And that file timestamp is 3/10/2022 at 7:21. Okay, so you can get the file. You can get the modified data, the file using this get last write time. Admittedly, that's probably a bit clunky, needing to have to do both of these. But yeah, you could list the files in the directory. You could get them by their last write time. That outputs a date time. So we could do something like this, like maybe build up a list. Let's just say we're going to build up. Let's just do it this way. I'm going to create an in-memory data structure here. So create data types integration flow structure, and I'll call this, XML file, I'll just call it wrapper. I like to call everything wrapper. This will be called file path. And I'll call this modified date. Modified date I'll turn into a date time. I'm just going to build an object to hold this data for me in my flow.
Right.
So let me go to my flow. What I'll do is I'm going to put a create data step here. And I'm going to add an empty list of that type I just created. So this will be called all files. And this will be called, I called it something wrapper, XML file wrapper, and it's a list. What I'll then do is find an add item step and add item to list. So I'll loop through, generate, get its modified date. And then what I'm going to do here is change my, let me pass in my list to set my add item step. So this is going to be all files. And if I now my list type is modified, add to end is fine. In new item, I'm going to say, oh, it's not taking that change in, is it? Let me save and close this. I don't know why it's not accepting that. All right, there's going to be build data, and file path comes from item, and modified date is going to come from that get last write time. And then I'm going to say change value or update the list every time I run through it. And then I'm going to find a sort array step. I'm going to put this on the done path of my for each here. And so the field, all right, so I'm going to have select my type here. Again, I'll search for wrapper and I'll find XML file wrapper. And the input will be my all files list. Okay, and then my sort parameters will be modified date descending. So if I get this right, and I look at my output data, my sorted array should show the timestamp. So let me just make a change. Let me use touch file here really quickly, just to force a change to one of these files. And I'll do the file. I need to copy one of those. Let me run that again, just a sec here. Okay, so I'm going to make the readme txt file. Let's see, read. Oops. Okay, there you are. And just to see, make sure this is working right, I'm just going to touch that file to update its modified date here. And then reconnect my flow. Okay, there's that. Now we're going to debug. Now, readme should be our, oops, if I'm right, our top file here. And there's readme txt. Great. On for March 15th.
Yep.
So now you've got a flow that's going to show you all the files in your directory, and it's going to give you access to those files by their date timestamps. So you'd have the file name as a property here. Of course, you could just look at the file name if you wanted, but here it's going to give us the full path, and then it gives us the modified date of that file. So now that we have that, now that we know that we can, and then, you know, basically we could loop again, or we could check its date against something. So let me just pause here for a minute, Chris, and let's see what questions you might have.
No, this is great. Yeah, I can see that, you know, I could even store, you know, a list because I don't think our database tables are going to be changing. So I could store a list of tables that we were interested in the internal data structure.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, with last modified, you know, timestamp on there. And then if, you know, there's a file with a newer timestamp on it, then I know we have to import it.
Yep. Okay, sure.
Yeah. So that looks good.
Yeah, because and then you would just basically, let's assume you're going to use like a fetch entity step here. And so you're going to have like another loop here. Maybe this sort is unnecessary for your example, but you would, this fetch entity step will let you access that local database data, right? And then you would check to see if maybe newer, so, or you might do like a greater than date, like is the date time on the file greater than the date timestamp of my database table record. And if false, you just go to the next one and ignore it, something like that.
Right.
While if it's true, you import and then do an update on that database table that I don't have an example of here, right? But that we're fetching from or
Yeah.
returning this data here.
Yep. Very good.
Yeah. And then do you need to know how to do runtime selection on the database? Because you might have to, assuming you're doing different database tables.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no. Well, okay. So you might have to insert into a unique database table. The one way to do that would be like string match. That's kind of a hard coded way, which is easy if that's not going to change much.
Mm-hmm.
Oops, I guess it's gonna be called match. Let's try match string match step. You could have something like this where you've identified, and let's just say, A, B, C, each of these, you'd have to create different table integrations.
Right.
Right. And each of these would go to a separate step or a separate integration. You could try to be fancy and use like do dynamic SQL, like actually do dynamic text creation and use like a single SQL step. You can dynamically identify the connection to the database, but not the table.
If you want to show just what like a dynamic SQL step might look like, that'd be great to see, but that might be too much to ask. So
yeah, it's really nothing here. I'm just going to save this and close. Sometimes now we have queries, right? So if you look at database integration here, you can add a query. And so you can say like select star from, I'll just say our account table here, right? But what we could say is where email address, right, equals, and then you can say at email, and you'll get a parameter here, which is an input to this step.
Mm-hmm.
And I can pass this in, so I can create queries that are parameterized, and then
Right.
each of these ats becomes an input. I can map those in. Now, if you need truly dynamic SQL, what you would use text manipulation. So you'd have like a raw SQL step. If you search for raw, you'll see raw SQL. Now this step just takes in a SQL command, so we can do text merge plain here,
Mm-hmm.
and we can build up the SQL command. But because we have things like string list builders, or we have steps with, like, you might look at in velocity here, which is a fancy custom merge step.
Oh.
What you can do is we've seen some examples where instead of like a customer might they might have like a template for a single, like they might say insert into, right? And then they might use this in velocity uses these $ signs, and it would say like table name, for example. They might build up a single like insert statement, and then they might loop that in some way, right? They might, you might do something like this where you'd loop, oops, excuse me. You do some sort of loop. I'm not going to lay all the steps out here, but you might generate a number of insert statements here. Then you might merge them all together and then pass that merge list into a raw SQL command. And now you can have you can run multiple inserts together or do multiple things. But in this place, you might say, let's assume all the tables share a common schema, but they have different table names.
Right.
Right. You might say insert into a table and set, and then you would do like, I guess value 1, right? And you do all of the particular sort of like insert pieces, right? I'm not gonna be able to write one right now, value 1.
Right.
I think it's something like this, right? And then value would be like ASDF.
Mm-hmm.
And that means that what you could do is you could parameterize the table name and the values here. And then all you'd have to do is derive the table name from the file. And there might be like a truth table.
Right.
Like you might have a truth table here. That truth table, we would create a new simple truth table here. And you create some input data here, and this would be called file name, right?
Yeah.
And then, sorry, go ahead, please.
No, I was right with you. In your truth table would map file name right to the database table name.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So we change this to string. We would name this thing, you know, MySQL DB name or something to make it informational. And then here it would be, you know, whatever, DBO dot table name.
Yeah.
And then we would put like, you know, the file name would be file name equals. And then here we could just put in ASDF. And if we get ASDF file, we can return DBO table name. And that means that comes out as a string, which means we could pass it into our merge, right? And then we could pass table name into table name here and do some fancy sort of sort of string manipulation work to get some dynamic SQL behavior.
Awesome. Looks good.
So, I mean, what do you think? Is this just give you maybe at least a starting point to keep having that conversation with the PM?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like it. It feels like, you know, definitely some great suggestions, and I think, yeah, use most of these in the pitch. So yeah, I think that's a great start.
Okay, great. Well, let me know if you have any other questions about this. And we do post these recordings on YouTube if you want to re-review that at a more normal speed.
Yeah, I definitely use that for the last one I did to go through it slowly again.
Yeah, sorry, I'm unavoidably I move fast, assuming there's gonna be lots of questions, and then there invariably are few. Yet I've moved fast for each one, so it's just
it's fine.
Catch 22.
Yeah.
Well, hey Chris, thanks for the question, and thanks for joining.
All right, you betcha.
You know, happy to help.
Thank you so much.
You bet. All right, who else has got questions for us today? Go ahead, David. What do you got?
Yeah, can you possibly point me in the right direction as to how I can like look at or pull an XML file and then manipulate that and then save it back? Like I get the file parts. I mean, we've done the file stuff, but like, I guess, do I need to, I'm looking in the, like I see the XML under data and all I see is deserialize, serialize, and XPath query. So I guess I just want to pull up a file, manipulate a node, and then save it back. So do I need to deserialize that into something and then do what I need to do? Or can I guess, how do I don't know. Can you point me in the right direction to do something like that?
Yeah, I think what you would do is it would be something like this, like load file. Like you load your file from the file system, however you're getting it. I'm just gonna use load file here. And then you would use a deserialized step. So you'd know the XML format. No, you actually have to do, hold on, let me see, get string from bytes, get bytes from string, get string from bytes. So you'd pass your file, you pass the byte array and to get string from bytes. That gets you effectively an XML string.
Gotcha.
You deserialize that XML string. And then you would do you'd now have like an actual object, right? And then you would do you would either add or add or update your XML object. I'm just using a placeholder step there. And then you would use XML, you'd serialize it back.
Serialize it back, yeah.
And then that gives you a string, and then you would do the reverse, I think, of get bytes from string. And then I think maybe it's just save file or maybe create file overwrites. And then you would pass it to create file, assuming you're updating like the same file.
Yeah.
And then you would pass the byte array from gets bytes from string into data, and then give it the same file path and file name as the file you loaded here.
I see.
And I think that gets you the file, gets the string from the bytes.
Yeah.
Deserializes the string into XML. Then you come in here and you do all of your manipulation. Then you pass that updated XML into a serialized to get it back to a string. Pass a string back and get bytes out of it. Pass the bytes into create file. And I think, but I'm unsure that if it's the same exact file path, you'll just overwrite or update that file. on the
I
file
gotcha.
system, not create a
Your
duplicate.
your add or update XML, your placeholder step there, is that you just use your normal regular string manipulation steps to fiddle with that, or like is there a what am I thinking?
No, you should be able to, it'll just be a regular object at that point. Like,
Oh,
because if you look
okay.
at like XML, let's say like, let's assume we for some reason had an account, right? Coming out of the XML serializer is an actual account. So if I look at this in Data Explorer, let me say,
Oh, I see. It wants me
output.
to deserialize it to an object. Okay.
Yeah, you can get it. Now I have an account I can deal with. So I can find that account and I can do change value or update it. I don't have to, you could deal with the XML directly, but assuming that, it would be more work to do it that way than it would just be to deserialize it.
Hmm,
Unless of course that XML is extremely dynamic in actually finding an XML structure to deserialize it into, what was problematic.
I see what you're saying. Okay, I got you.
But yeah, you would just like find the property. Like, let's assume like if this was, let's assume it's the account, right? I came back here and used like a create data step instead of my placeholder step. Maybe I need to just update one of like the email address. Oh, it didn't take that, did it? Let me try this again. You know, I can declare my updated email as a single string. And then, you know, let's assume I get that email from somewhere. I'll just put some, and then I could say change value. And then it would be, you know, account email address. And then this, when it runs through, it'll find this, it'll update the email address property of the XML object to this, and then you'll just turn it right back into XML. So you'll have modified that one particular value.
I see. Okay.
Now, of course, you might have to do loops and other things in here
Yeah.
if you've got to deal with a list, but
Okay.
so does that give you some insight, at least
Yeah.
some starting point?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. What's the like the customer
So,
use case
like
there?
we installed it like decisions at various clients and stuff, right? And I think we've had trouble just getting a list of stuff that needs to be done. And now with I guess a new thing that we're doing, we need to make sure that we're configuring decisions as HTTPS. So assuming that the other things are in place, I want to just write a flow that goes and validates the fact that everything in settings.xml and the web config file is what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And if it's not, then I just want to either update or add in the tags to make it correct and then save it back to where, like, whenever one of our people goes to install it, they're not opening up and jacking with those files. They just run a flow and we're taking care of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, understand. Yeah, there's something I've a long sought after ask. In fact, I just realized the other day that no one had given it to me when I had asked for it to be built. But there's often times where we want to compare and contrast. Like there's some environmental difference between two servers that that's causing an issue and we can't figure out what it is.
Yeah.
That would just like look at the settings, look at web config and some other places, like look at like a portal settings and other things in the database, and then just give me a list of all the differences between the two environments.
Right.
So I can say, okay, wait. Oh, these guys are using secure integrated security true, and these guys, this one's not. All right, let's go look at that. So I've definitely thought of something similar like that before.
Yeah, I think we
did not
tried
create
to do
that.
something like that at one point, to be able to compare in environments like that. I think our devs were trying to write something. It was a couple of years ago, maybe, that they were looking into something like that. I can't remember what roadblocks they hit with that. But I don't see how that, I mean, if you're just comparing the settings files and the other, I mean, if you're comparing those XML files in that directory, that should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Great. Anything else you got for us today?
No, that's it.
All righty. All right. Well, that takes us to 12:30, and doesn't look like there's anyone on. Anthony, Ben, congratulations on your official transfer over to the documentation team, sir.
Thank you, Will.
And I guess that's it then. We will, Maru, who's on tomorrow and Thursday? Is it Derek and Dylan?
Yes, Derek and Dylan.
Okay, wonderful. All right, thanks everyone for your time today. Have a great afternoon and I will see you guys next week.
Alrighty.
Thanks everyone. See ya.